Just a little bit about myself. My name is Jessica Allen. I've been a transaction coordinator within Keller Williams for a little over 7 years. I've worked with some of the top agents in the business. I've been in the real estate business for over 20 years. I've worked at several different real estate offices, Bank of America Home Loans. I worked there for a few years, and then I also have worked with a couple lending companies. I've also lived in the Antelope Valley for 32 years. I have 2 kids, a fiance and a dog, and I actually just got my real estate license 6 months ago, and I'm looking forward to see what's going to happen in the future.
Congratulations.
Thank you. So there's going to be a few topics that we're going to go over today. The first one is the EMD, that's the earnest money deposit. Excuse me. The second one is going to be inspections, and then appraisal, the request for repairs, contingencies, loan documents, funding and recording, and then also command. So the first and most important thing that you do when you open escrow is you want to make sure that you get the buyer's getting the earnest money deposit into escrow. The earnest money deposit is required to be submitted into escrow within 3 business days. So if you open escrow on a Friday, the first day doesn't start until Monday. So they would have Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday to get that deposit into escrow. The deposit, it does secure the transaction. It's basically letting the seller know that the buyer is serious about purchasing their home. The buyer can wire the money. They can drop it off at escrow with a personal check, or, hi, good morning.
Morning.
Okay, so there's 3, the way to get the money into escrow is to either wire the money from their bank, they can drop off a personal check at escrow, or I believe it can be a money order, and you can drop that off at escrow as well.
Cashier check.
Cashier check, okay. So that's the first and most important thing that you guys want to do. As soon as escrow opens and you have a fully executed contract, this is the first thing that you want to do. You want to make sure that you're following up with the buyer's agent that they're getting this into escrow immediately. So the next portion is inspections. The inspections are also an important part of the transaction. This is going to be the time where the buyer will be able to come in and conduct any inspection that they want to make them feel good about purchasing the house. The most common inspections are the home inspection and a termite inspection. Most of the time, the Antelope Valley, we don't have termites out here, but it's mostly for like dry rot within like the wood or the eaves or things like that, or the fascias. Excuse me. There are other inspections when you get further out, like on the east side or in Acton, some places also in Palmdale, Lancaster. There's septic inspections. You could have a well inspection, a sewer inspection. Sometimes buyers want to request a mold inspection. These aren't all necessary inspections, but it is something that the buyer can request if they would like. In most cases, the buyer always pays for the home inspection and any additional inspection that they wish to have. However, they can ask the seller to pay for it, but that would be negotiated through the contract. The termite inspection, most of the time, not lately, but most of the time the buyers will ask the seller to pay that as well, but that can be countered out of the offer. So the EMD and the inspections are the 2 first things that you want to get started in your transaction. The buyer can waive the The inspections, they don't have to have any. We just need to have the proper documentation from the agent to waive that. We have to make sure that we tell them they need to have the inspection. So a couple tips. Sorry, I'm off this tray. A couple tips just to have. When you're setting up the inspection, the home inspection with your seller, the first thing you want to do is just let the seller know that it's best that they're not at the property during the inspection. It just gives the buyer time to feel comfortable, have their space, ask questions, things like that. So you just want to let them know that if they could just step out of the house or leave for an hour or so. Also, if the buyer has a VA financing, thank you. If the buyer has VA financing, the lender is going to require for a clear termite, which means no repairs can be on the termite inspection. That's a must. You have to have that. The buyer cannot pay for that inspection. The agent can pay for it, the buyer's agent, listing agent, the seller can pay for it, but however, the buyer cannot pay for that inspection or repairs. Do you guys have any questions so far?
That's for the VA loan?
For a VA home, yes.
Learn something every day.
Also, that's not on here, but if you have VA and there's a septic or a well on the property, you have to have those inspections. So the next section is appraisal.
I'm sorry, excuse me.
Yes.
I apologize for that. Okay, so you were saying for the VA loan, the buyer cannot pay for what kind of inspection? I'm sorry?
The termite inspection.
The termite.
Yes.
They cannot pay for that.
Correct.
So who usually assumes that? Is that the seller or the VA lender?
Usually it's the seller. As a buyer's agent, you want to make sure that you're covering your buyer and that you're putting it on the contract that the seller's to pay for it. If it comes down to it and it's not on the contract, then usually what happens is the buyer's agent will pay for it. Unless there's some negotiation, the seller doesn't mind paying it or the listing agent will pay for it. But usually, as a buyer's agent, you want to make sure that you're putting that on the contract.
Okay. Do you know how much that usually is for that inspection?
Anywhere between $80 to $100. That's just for the report.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. So the appraisal is, I believe, the most crucial part of the entire escrow. It basically, I mean, it determines what the value of your seller's home is. When you're scheduling the appraisal, you want to make sure when you go to the appointment that you are bringing comparables, any comparables that you have. And what you'll do is you'll provide those to the appraiser, but don't give it to them until like the end of the inspection. You don't really want to make the appraisers mad. You kind of like have to, do whatever they say, because you don't want to jeopardize the value of the property. You don't want to make them feel like you're being too pushy on them. Try to make small talk with them. Try to, ask about how their day is or maybe how many inspections they've done that day. But don't ever try to go in and talk about the value of the home. This is like the one thing that they hate is when you go in there and you try to push the value on them.
Well, and by law, I used to work for an appraiser for 15
Yeah.
years. You can't talk about value. You can't.
Right. You can't, but people do.
I know, but I'm saying,
Yeah.
technically, you can't.
It's a nice
Right.
cake. I wonder what the value of that cake is now.
It's always important to be present for the appraisal. Never send an appraiser to a house and don't show up. You always want to show your face, you want to get to know them, you want to make friends with them. There's several appraisers around the valley that are constantly doing, so if you have multiple listings, you're probably going to end up running into that appraiser again.
So you want them to like you?
Absolutely, yes. Definitely want them to like you. So just always be present. Try to stay out of their way, you know, if they need anything. Sometimes they'll come and they'll ask you to do things like open the doors, open the garage, open the sides of the gates, so they just have easy access. They can just go. They're so busy right now, they don't have time to.
And I would imagine you want the seller gone during that time too, huh?
Not necessarily. As long as you're communicating to your client, your seller, like, hey, we're not going to be, you know, trying to talk to them and things like that. That's not a problem. But yeah, I've never really had an issue with a seller and an appraiser. So, I mean, if they don't want to be there, they don't have to. Most of the time, it's the inspection's like maybe 15 minutes at the most, so it goes pretty quick. And buyers aren't usually present for the appraisal. So yeah, just always be present there. It's important to represent your client, let them know that you know you care about them, you want to make sure that everything is going well and smoothly. And then once the inspection is done, usually you'll just hand them some comps with one of your business cards, so that way they know, you know.
But the appraisal is the buyer's, right? It's not the seller's.
It is, yes.
So the buyer's agent is the one that should be there sitting there. Should be the seller's agent.
Yeah.
Buyer's agent arranges it, so.
Yeah, because you want to go in, you want to send them the comps, you want to, I mean, if for some reason you're out of town or something, the buyer's agent can go. Sometimes buyer's agents want to be there, which is fine. Sometimes the buyers want to be there. It just ends up causing problems when they show up. So I would try to do everything you can to not have the buyer there. So once the appraisal report comes back and they've done their inspection, there's a possibility that there might be some repairs that the appraiser has called out. These repairs are required to be completed before escrow closes. The lender cannot fund the loan if these repairs are not completed. Also, you want to get the repairs done as soon as possible because the appraiser has to go back out and do another inspection. They have to go back out, make sure the repairs are completed. So you don't want that to hold up your transaction. Some of the common repairs are smoke detectors, carbon monoxides, the water heater not being double strapped. One thing to note on a VA loan, if there's any peeling, chipped, cracked paint anywhere around the house, it has to be fixed. One time we had a property, and it was an old house, the whole backyard, the whole backyard patio, it was a huge fit. The whole thing had to be scraped and painted. So when you're at that point, you could talk to the appraiser like, okay, is it going to be cheaper for us to just take this down rather than have to go in and repaint the whole entire thing? Because it's not just repainting, you have to scrape it, you have to sand it, you have to get it has to look nice. So that's one thing to note. Also, like around the fascia of the house, that's always an issue as well with VA loans with the paint. So I've never seen it get too crazy.
Our FHA is prior to 1978. VA it's anything, but for FHA it's prior to 1978.
Oh, really? I didn't know. So yeah, appraisers are different. Conventional loans, they're a little more lenient. FHA, they're a little bit stricter, and then VA, they're really strict. So there's certain guidelines that they have to go by. But for the most part, it's usually like a smoke detector. And sometimes the appraiser will let you take pictures. Because if they have to go back out to the property, then they have to charge the buyer a second, like a re-inspection fee, which I think is like $175. And the buyer has to pay. because the seller didn't perform, the buyer has to go back out and pay for it.
Can you ask for a credit for the seller to pay for that?
You can. I've never seen it happen.
Well, yeah.
But yeah, you definitely can. I mean, as a seller, there's basic things that should be taken care of prior to an appraisal, and that is to make sure that there's enough smoke detectors in the house, there is enough carbon monoxide detectors in the house, and that the water heaters are double strapped. Those are the three main things that usually come up on an appraisal.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Water heaters, double strap.
Smoke detectors.
Smoke detectors.
And a carbon monoxide. There should be a carbon monoxide on every level of the house. So if there's 2 stories, there should be 2 carbon monoxides. And then also smoke detectors, I believe is in every living area
And bedrooms.
and bedrooms. So if you're in there, you're sitting, you're laying, it needs to have a smoke detector, and in hallways. But you could, if you're not on, if you're unsure, you can always just Google it and it'll tell you in there.
And the dual ones, the carbon smoke are fine.
Yep, they even have plug-in ones.
Yeah.
Yeah, that you plug into the wall, that aren't like up high. You
That's the
just-
carbon monoxide? They have the plug-in.
Yep. So, sometimes the value could come in higher than the purchase price. So if you have an offer of a purchase for $500,000, but the appraisal came in at, say, $510,000, you, as the seller and the listing agent, you will never know that. They will never tell you that. The buyer doesn't have to give a copy of the report. They pay usually between like $600 to $800 for that report, and that's their own private report. If anything, the lender will just tell you the loan's good. They're never going to tell you that it went above the purchase price. They don't want the seller to know that, because then the seller's thinking in their head, oh, well, maybe I could cancel this and we could get another offer and it'll be higher. So, again, they just won't tell you. And that's fine, as long as everything's good, yeah.
So how does it work? I know sometimes in contracts, like to make your offer look stronger, you'll say we'll go X amount of dollars over the appraised value. So how does that work then if the selling or listing side doesn't know what the appraised value actually was?
So, good question. That's if the appraisal comes in low. So if you have a purchase at 500 and your appraisal came in at 490, then in the contract, the buyer says, I'll pay $5,000 over the appraised value. So that will put the purchase price at 495, because they would make up that difference.
Right, and that just comes out of good faith because the listing agent.
No, so if it comes in low, you're gonna know.
Oh.
You're gonna wanna request a copy of that appraisal. At least the page that shows that it's low. I'm not saying agents would, but they could say, hey, it came in low, the seller needs to lower the price $10,000. Okay, well, show me proof, like I need to know, and then we'll go back and discuss it and talk to the seller about it. But that's only if the appraisal comes in low.
Okay.
That's when you do that.
What's that?
So once the new price is determined, if the appraisal does come in low. Hello?
All of my data.
Okay. So if the value comes in, higher, or it's good, it's at purchase price, we're good. We can move forward, we can continue on with the process of escrow. If it comes in lower, then at that point, seller and buyer are gonna have to figure it out. They're gonna have to negotiate, the seller's gonna drop the price, the buyer's gonna bring in the difference, they're gonna meet in the middle, something's gotta happen. If at any point, none of that can happen, the worst case scenario is you have to cancel. So, we obviously don't wanna come to that point, but it happens sometimes. The buyer doesn't have the money to make up the difference. Seller has their reasons why they can't drop the price. Maybe, they have other things going on. So it's always worked out, but there has been cases where we've had to cancel escrow because of it.
You have to cancel because it's high. The house is too high for the buyer.
Well, you would cancel if the buyer itself, so if the appraisal, no, so if the appraisal came in low and they can't negotiate, they can't figure out a price, they won't agree to anything, the buyer can't come in with money or the seller doesn't want to drop the price, then you would have to cancel. There would be no way to move forward with the transaction. One thing to note with FHA appraisals is that appraisal with FHA financing stays with that property for 120 days. So if for some reason you cancel the transaction, that previous buyer was FHA, and then you go into a new escrow and that buyer is FHA, whatever the value of that appraisal was is going to stay with that new escrow. As part of FHA guidelines, and so yeah, if you cancel FHA and then you go into another FHA offer escrow, you have to keep that appraisal with the house.
So another appraiser doesn't come back out, or?
No.
No,
Just-
they just
it gets
automatically transfers
Yeah.
over.
Just as a caveat, they can order another appraisal, but FHA is gonna use the lower
Yeah,
appraisal.
so you can, yeah. So whichever one comes in, whatever is the lowest one.
Yeah, they're not gonna use the higher one.
Right. Obviously, yeah.
Darn, okay.
So how many days, I'm sorry, how many days did you say that was good for?
120 days.
120 days. So, okay, let me get this straight. So if an appraisal comes in on a property that you submitted an offer for at X amount of dollars, you said if you back out of that deal and you go into another escrow
The FHA.
with a different house, that appraisal amount stays with that house, or?
No, you're talking about like being as a buyer's agent.
Yeah.
As a seller, if you are in contract with FHA financing with a buyer,
Yes.
and that you have the appraisal and you end up canceling, if you go into escrow again on your listing with another
Okay.
FHA financing, then you have to keep that appraisal.
Got you. So that appraisal stays with that property? That's what I
Yes,
was-
yes.
Okay, thank you so much. That's what I thought. Just wanted to make clear. Thank you.
Yeah, of course. It doesn't matter what escrow. FHA has a huge like database system, and they just transfer it over. So like on the lending side, they just go into whatever system, FHA system that they have, and they pull that appraisal, and it will now be with your new escrow.
120 days.
Yes.
All right, add it up.
Wait.
Is it not switching?
Okay. The next section is request for repairs. This is also, all of them are important, but this is also important. In many cases, probably about 96% of the time, the buyers are always going to ask for something. They're gonna ask for repairs, they're gonna ask for credit, they're gonna ask for something. So just keep in mind that the seller does not have to respond to a request for repair. They don't have to answer them, they don't have to give anything, they don't have to do repairs, they don't have to do anything. They're not obligated to fix anything. The buyer also, though, if they're not satisfied with the property, they can cancel. So usually you want to guide your seller to negotiate, depending on what the repairs are. I mean, it could be extreme to replacing a whole entire septic system to, fixing a light bulb that's out. So just really depends on what the case is. I always recommend only considering safety issues or hazard issues. Anything else, cosmetic, that's the buyer's not buying a brand new house, that they can fix that on their own. But if it's something that's, a safety concern or hazard concern, absolutely 100%, I would have them fix it. Again, if the buyer's not happy with, the seller not responding, they can cancel. If they're within their contingency period, they're not going to be at risk for losing their deposit. One thing I do always do is, as the seller, is I always recommend that the seller does not respond to a request for repair until the appraisal's back. You always want to make sure that you get the appraisal back. You want to know if it's at value, if the appraiser's called out any repairs, because those are two things that have to be done in order to move forward. So if the appraiser calls out repairs, those have to be done no matter what. You cannot close the transaction if they're not done. Obviously, if the value comes in lower and the seller agrees to lower the price, they're now, netting less than what they thought they were. So you don't want them to agree to repairs that are not necessary to close the transaction. You don't want them to make them spend more money out of their pocket that they don't have to spend. So I always tell them just to wait until the appraisal comes in.
What if the appraisal takes forever to come back and you're past your contingency?
Good point. That's where it kind of,
hence our current transaction.
yeah, that's where it kind of gets a little tricky. It's just hard to say. I mean, it comes into communicating with your client. If they're not sending their contingencies, whether or not they're asking for repairs, it doesn't matter because the seller, again, doesn't have to respond. So they should still be removing their contingency. And with an inspection contingency, they still have 2 other contingencies that they could use to cancel the loan. So there shouldn't be any reason why they can't remove their inspection contingency, even if you haven't responded.
Okay.
That's how I've.
Yeah.
So yeah, so again, they always ask for something. Sometimes it's, a huge laundry list of 50 things. Sometimes they'll take the whole inspection report and just say, fix everything. So it's about communicating with your client also, letting them know, the important things of it. You don't want to have your seller sell a house that has safety issues or hazard concerns. So you want to make sure those are at least taken care of. Any questions?
That's good.
Are safety and hazards usually what the appraiser looks at, or is there sometimes the buyer would have to say?
So it could be the appraiser. Again, every appraiser is different. They do have specific rules and guidelines they have to follow. But one appraiser could call out one thing and another appraiser just wouldn't even say anything about it. So that's why the buyer would need to do like a home inspection. So that person can go through and figure out if there's any concerns or anything like that. So the next section is contingencies. There are 3 standard contingencies on every purchase contract. Inspection contingency, appraisal contingency, and the loan contingency.
Is this being recorded, please?
Yes,
Awesome. Thank you so much.
you're welcome. In the contract, in the purchase agreement, there are 3 contingencies. All 3 of these contingencies are due 17 days after you have a fully executed contract. It's preset automatically. When a buyer's agent's trying to write a good offer, sometimes they'll lower those contingencies. They'll put them, an inspection contingency to 10 days. Sometimes they'll even remove the appraisal contingency, so it's not even part of the transaction. I've had it where a lender was okay with it and they removed all of the contingencies and we just opened escrow. So it's preset to 17 days, but those days can change. You always want to be very cautious on your dates for contingencies, because that basically is what secures the loan, and it secures the buyer's deposit. So you want to make sure that the buyer's doing their due diligence and doing their research and making sure that they're satisfied with the house, but on top of that, they're removing their contingencies. Because as they remove their contingencies, their deposit becomes less and less to them, if that makes sense. Once all their contingencies are removed, say you're at the end of the transaction, the buyer loses their job. Obviously, you wouldn't keep the deposit in that case, it's probably a bad example. The buyer just backs out for whatever reason. Now that all contingencies are removed, that deposit goes to the seller. The buyer doesn't get his deposit back. So as a listing agent, as a seller, you want those contingencies removed, absolutely, on the date that they're due. Sometimes they'll extend them, they'll ask for extensions, and that's fine. You always want to be in communication with the other agent. You want to make sure everybody's on the same page. When people don't when people don't respond, you can't get a hold of the lender, can't get a hold of the agent. Obviously something's going on in most cases. So you just need to communicate, make sure that everybody's on the same page. Why do you need to extend your contingency? They give you a good reason, okay. When the contingency is due, you want to actually send the form to the buyer's agent. You want to send it to them. Here it is, it's due in 2 days. Make sure you get it back to me. Just makes it easier, because so they don't have any reason to not get it to you. So if you passed your time and they haven't removed their contingencies, some people get scared of a notice to perform. So a notice to perform is a notice to the buyer to let them know, hey, you passed your time, we now need to remove contingencies, and you're not doing that. So now you have 2 days to do so, and if you don't, the seller can cancel if they want to. So people get scared because they think if they send that, the buyer's gonna get scared. The seller doesn't have to cancel. The seller only has a couple options to cancel a transaction. One of it is to remove the contingencies. If they don't, they send the notice to perform and they can cancel. It's kind of just to push the agent a little bit, the buyer's agent, let them know, hey, my client's serious. If you guys aren't removing these contingencies, we may take another offer, we may cancel, we may move forward with something else. You may need to send, sometimes all the contingencies aren't due on the same date. So just again, make sure that you're aware of your timelines, your dates, so you're making sure that these are being removed on time. You may need to send several different forms to the agent. It would be contingency number 1, contingency number 2, and then eventually it would be to remove all contingencies. Any questions? So another milestone, big deal in an escrow is getting loan documents, funding, and reporting. That's what everybody wants to do. So after you've gone through the whole process, your appraisal's back, you're good, it's at value, things are moving forward, all your inspections are done, contingencies are removed. The next thing that you're looking for is for the escrow company to get loan documents. So once you've gone through the process, the lender will give the file, it's called clear to close, which means all conditions have been met, buyer's good, we're ready to move forward and get the loan documents. So at that point, within about 24 to 48 hours, I would say, the lender will send the loan documents to escrow so the buyer can sign them with the notary. They do have to be signed with a notary. Once the loan documents are signed and returned to the lender, the loan will typically fund within 24 to 48 hours. Some lenders can fund same day, just depends on how fast they get the documents back. Sometimes they have to be FedExed over. Some lenders can take an actual scanned copy to start funding. So it just depends on the lender's process. Once you actually get confirmation of funding, you will, the next day in LA County, you will record with the county recorder's office, which means that you officially closed escrow, and you would have the seller hand over keys, depending on the contract. If you had asked for the seller to stay in the property a few days after, all that would just be determined on whatever was agreed to in the contract. In Kern County, you can fund and record in the same day. So if you fund early enough during the day, you can record that same day as well. So that's helpful. And hopefully LA County will open it back up to where we can do special recordings again. And special recording means in LA County you can fund and record in the same day. But after COVID started, we weren't able to do that. So the buyer's agent is going to want to set up a final walkthrough with your seller. I believe it's 3 or 5 days prior to closing. The reason for this is the buyer needs to go in and make sure that the house is still the same. When they first saw it, there's no holes in the walls, new holes in the walls, broken windows, things like that. This isn't a time for them to come in and ask for additional repairs. It's just a quick walkthrough, make sure everything is good. If any repairs were agreed to, then they would verify that they were completed at that time. Just a note, when it's getting closer to closing, remind your clients to turn off the utilities, take them out of their name. I had a case one time where the seller never did for, I don't know, 6 months. And it ended up being like a $1,000 bill in that seller's name because the buyers never transferred it into their name. So always make sure that utilities are going to be shut off. They do have to stay on until the day we close. So anytime after that, they can have them shut off. So I'm sure everybody in here is familiar with Command, right? Yes?
Yeah.
Yes. As agents, you guys use it as a platform for your contacts and things like that. There's also a side to it for transactions. All of your transactions need to be uploaded into Command. It's basically Keller Williams' way of tracking transactions, making sure everybody's in compliance and we don't get the broker in trouble. This is also the system that you're going to use to make sure that you get your commission check on time when it closes. So when you have a fully executed listing agreement, the first thing you're going to do is you're going to sign into Command, and you're going to upload it into the system, and you're going to, submit it to our compliance officer, Angie, who was just sitting right here. That has to be uploaded into Command within 3 days of the listing agreement being accepted. Yeah, 3 days. 3 days after you have an accepted listing agreement. Also, once you have the fully executed purchase contract, you have 3 days to get it into Command. Per compliance, it has to be in the system within 3 days.
What if it's not?
I know they're gonna start implementing, you could get fined. They haven't right now, but it is a possibility that you could. You're gonna be in command several times throughout the escrow period. Once you get documentation, you're gonna wanna go in there, you're gonna wanna upload it, your home inspection, your termite reports, all your disclosures, your escrow packages, things like that. All of that's gonna go into the command system. If you fail to upload your documents into command, you're not gonna get paid. You have to have a fully submitted, approved file in command from compliance to be able to go ahead and get your check when it comes in. Once everything's good, it's submitted, it's approved, then compliance will send an email to the MCA and let them know that they're able to release your commission check to you. There's also in command is where you would request your CDA, which is your Commission Disbursement Authorization Form. And this is the breakdown of your check, your commission check. So you request that through command as well. You want to make sure that that's being done in a timely manner, because you want to make sure escrow has the breakdown of your check, because if they don't, they're just going to send a bulk check over to our office, and it's going to prolong you getting your commission check. You guys have any questions on this?
So it all has to be filed in a timely fashion, all this stuff during escrow?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And if you don't, there's potential fines in the future, maybe?
I mean, there could be. There hasn't been, but it is required to have your, you have to at least have that purchase contract in command.
Okay.
All the rest of the stuff, you don't have to.
Oh.
But you have to have that fully executed contract in command.
Gotcha.
Yes.
How, I'm fine, but what would happen if, like, let's say you're in contract, but then the seller withdraws the listing?
You mean you're in escrow?
Like you said, that when you're in command, you have to upload it, the agreement or whatever it was into command. But like, let's say we submit it and then, the seller backs out.
Oh, so like your listing agreement?
Yes.
There's a space in there that you can just close it out.
Oh, okay.
But we have to keep track of all the listing agreements, even if it doesn't go through.
Oh, so.
Yeah. Anything that's been signed, because you're signing, with the broker and everything, so you want to make sure that he's in compliance with what he needs to keep up to date. And yeah, so it's I can't think what it's called. It's not archive, but it's like lost. Well, I can see it right there. Lost something. So you just click on that button and it'll take it out of your
Lost opportunity.
Lost opportunity. I'm like, I can see it.
I know where to click.
Just a couple things. Communication. Even if you feel like you're being overbearing, overwhelming, talk to the agent, talk to the lender, talk to escrow. Make sure everybody is on the same page. I can't express to you as much as I can, but communication will always make you have a smooth transaction. Whether bad things are going on, good things are going on, you always have to communicate. If something bad's going on, people tend to get nervous. They don't want to talk to their seller about it. Oh, we got an inspection and the septic needs to be replaced. It's $15,000. But you don't want to prolong that. You don't want to make them wait. You want to tell them up front so you can either get it handled or you have to cancel, but you always want to make sure that you're communicating with everybody. One other thing, as a listing agent, you must provide the buyer seller disclosures. Seller disclosure package. It varies in the disclosures on what's needed per the transaction, if it's in a trust, if It was built before 1979. It just all depends on details on the property. But you do need to get those to the buyer within 7 days of opening escrow. That's also in the contract. It's a preset date. I always recommend trying to get them when you take the listing agreement. It's a lot easier. You just get it out of the way. You don't gotta worry about it. Once you open escrow, you just send those over to the buyer's agent. If not, no big deal. Just try to get them out to the seller to sign, like the day you open escrow or the next day, just so you can make sure that you're getting those on time. Do you guys have any other questions? No?
Oh, this is good. So disclosure is just, what is that exactly? Just,
The disclosures?
yeah.
So it's like a seller property questionnaire. The seller has to answer, it's like 4 pages of questions. You want to disclose, excuse me, you want to disclose on there anything they know about the property. Some sellers get scared and are like, oh, I don't want to answer this. I don't want to tell, I don't want to tell them this. But it's in their best interest to tell because it could eventually come back to them if there becomes a problem and they didn't disclose it to the buyer. So if they know anything about the property, it's important to disclose it. There's a real estate transfer disclosure, statewide buyer seller advisory. They're just standard disclosures that the seller has to provide to the buyer.
Okay. Just things about the home.
Mm-hmm. Yep. The area, California, Antelope Valley, the earthquake, things like that.
Oh, okay. Okay, that's good.
I have a question. Maybe
Yeah.
it's not for you. When we get disclosures from the other side of the transaction,
Huh?
like from Remax, for example, where they have their own set of disclosures of who they work with and all that, are our clients required to sign their office disclosures?
They're not necessarily required. However, we actually have one too that we need other agents to sign. I've never really had an issue with it. If you're not comfortable with your client signing it, I would usually just send an email and say, this doesn't pertain to our transaction. I'm not having my client sign it. And then they can usually just take that email and put it in their file. Yeah.
What is ours?
It's the affiliation disclosure.
Okay.
That we're affiliated with Monarch, Contract Escrow. I think there's somebody else on there. Yeah, but we only require that if we're the listing site. So like different offices are required on buyer seller, doesn't matter. But Keller Williams only requires it on the listing site.
And we could receive the same sort of an email
Yeah,
for our compliance.
yeah. And she'll take it, our compliance will take it. It's understandable. I mean, sometimes there's stuff in there that just doesn't even pertain to the seller. It's about the buyer, but they want the seller to sign it. So it doesn't make any sense.
Right.
Yeah. Okay, well, I did end a little bit early, but if you guys have any other questions, I'm here to stay for a little bit. This is all my information. Also, I will be having a transactions buyer class on the 25th, same time, 10 o'clock.
Oh, you printed me already. You printed me like yesterday. I was
Yes.
wondering where you looked familiar.
She did to me. Man, she spammed it. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah, she printed me this week.
Is there any way I could, if you could email me your slideshow so I could go over it? I missed more than half.
Yeah. Yeah, did everybody sign in on that sign-in sheet that I have?
Where's it?
Could you please for me?
Do that, dude. Sorry.
It's recorded too, right? Yeah, on Zoom.
Oh, that might even be better.
Yeah, it's recorded on Zoom, so you can watch.
Yeah, you could ask
Oh,
Mike.
okay.
He can
Thank
give
you.
us a copy if you want a copy of it.
Oh, nice.
Yes, please.
So you're gonna be doing a buyer's then?
Yeah.
The 25th of April.
Yep, you're good there. By 10 o'clock.
Was this the seller side?
Huh?
Was this more on the seller side?
The listing side was on the side.
Oh, got it.
Yes. Thank you, everybody, for coming.
Thank you, it was very informative.
Very helpful.
That's right. That's what I said. Nice.
But it was
That's me, just come. No, it's good to see you.
Yeah, for sure. I'm gonna reach, if everybody puts their email and stuff on there, you'll be getting something from me
Okay.
as well too.
Okay, perfect.
But yeah, text me, whatever.
Okay, yeah, because I really didn't want to see it, but I had a meeting, so I had to like run in here and stuff.
No
And I was
worries.
like, I got like the last 5 minutes of it.
Yeah, no worries.
Thanks, thank you so
Yeah,
much.
of course. You guys are making me all nervous in here.
Just to let you know, I didn't know anything, so I nodded my head like I knew. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, go ahead.
Sorry.
You said, what are you doing on the buyer side?
25th.
25th.
Yeah.
Let's do
This
it.
one's for this, for the leasing, well, we don't. Deal with leasing.
Yeah, right?
Thank you so much. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you for coming.
Thank you, Jessica.
You're welcome. Thank you.
So what you can do is you can probably take that one from so
So usually the leasing, well, hold on,
Usually the listing.
usually the list. No, I forgot what the word.
Listing side versus
Let me
buyer
know.
side or what?
No. The disclosures.
Yeah. You guys will do those.
Fill those, you do help the sellers with those, or they have to do it themselves?
I DocuSign it, but usually the sellers always have questions.
And then the agents can have
Yeah.
questions.
Yeah, so if you send them out through, zip forms, it pre-fills everything. Because like the seller property questionnaire has like, I don't know, like 15, 20 questions. And it's like yes, no, whatever. So when you do it through zip forms and then it sends through either the DigiSign or DocuSign, it pre-fills everything for you.
Yeah,
So you
yeah.
kind of just
Through car, right?
send it over, yeah. Yeah, or you can take them to your listing appointment with you. Like if you know that they're gonna actually sign, take it with you.
You can
have them
ask
fill
and
it
have
out.
them, okay, you can check,
And
okay.
you can sit there with them, if they have questions, things like that. Yeah, it's usually the easiest.
Right.
Thank you.
No
So now are
problem.
you working with different agents with the transaction, or how is it that your business is?
Yeah. So, I was working in here with an individual agent, and then I went on my own and kind of created my own business. So now I work with people at Remax, I work with people at EXP, I work with people here.
Oh, so do you have a current office, or you're working from home?
My kitchen.
Fire, that's fire. That's exciting.
Yes, I am trying to, hoping that I can get an office in here soon.
Yeah.
Nice. Nice.
So you guide new agents as well on what they have to do as well? Like,
Say that
let's say, so do you guide new agents through a transaction, like if you're working with them?
I can. I definitely can, yeah. We can work something out to where I can help, write a contract and do all of that, basically, what we just went through. Yeah.
Okay, so you would tell them like the disclosures or the forms that you need to get.
Yeah.
And she's a superstar, so. Yes. Jessica is, yeah.
Thank
She'll-
you.
Yeah, make your life easier. Huh? Every transaction, like, so she will handle like the craziest issues, things you ever. Yeah, the baskets.
Oh,
Yeah.
your mom,
She will, yeah. She will do the
Yes.
baskets for the team
really?
or closing, like the closing gifts.
Yeah, I actually just started doing that again, so if you don't.
Yeah, very, very nice
Oh,
baskets.
really? Yeah.
Yeah.
We stopped just because of COVID and things were just crazy and like couldn't find anything anywhere.
Yeah.
But yeah, started
Oh,
doing
that's
that.
And how do we contact you for a basket? On your website? On your email, I mean?
yeah, that's
Just
fine.
email you?
Call
Does
me or
your
text me.
mom have like an Instagram of,
We do. We need to get it a little more established, but we do have an Instagram, and I don't know the name, but I can get it to you.
Oh.
Yeah.
So that way you don't have to worry about something.
Right? Oh my God. Well, let's see. Okay. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you.
It was nice to
Thank
see
you.
you. I love you.
What's the cookie?